And thank you all for being here today. I really appreciate it. I will start today's session with gratitude and going to give you just another minute or so to answer the poll questions, and then I'll end the poll and we'll take a quick look by way of an icebreaker. I see we have representation across the extension system, coast to coast and beyond. So thank you for investing your valuable time with Extension Foundation today. I hope this can be profitable for you. I'll start with a quick story and what I heard the marketing guru Marcus Sheridan once call vanguarding, which is to give you a heads up so there are no surprises later. I am co-working with my 7-year-old daughter today. My wife and I have 4 kiddos, all of whom are 4-H enrolled. And she had a little bit of an accident today at the pool, got a bit of a black eye. And so we're a little bit just trying to navigate some hurt body and trying to find a safe space today. So if you hear noises or humming, it may be my daughter. And if you see a cameo appearance, that explains it. So I appreciate your flexibility and hosting both of us today. So I want to spend time talking today about AI usage. I know many of you, based on what I'm seeing in the poll, let me go ahead and end this and we'll share the results. Many of you have some level of AI experience, right? It looks like, oh goodness here, almost like 60, I'm bad at doing math on the fly, but let's say like almost 70% either have never used the tool or are just experimenting and feel like a beginner. So that's okay. Many people across the country and a variety of industries are in the exact same boat. So you're not alone. On the other hand, there are about a third of you who are using AI regularly or feel very conversant, which is fantastic. And so my goal today would be to help you move up one stage in the ladder, right? Whether you're just getting started and need that first nudge, whether you're already really proficient and looking to start using those tools in service to others, I'm hopeful there's something that can either reinforce something you've already heard, challenge your thinking, or give you some new ideas to experiment with. Then if we move down to the second poll question, which of the following AI use cases do you most want to apply? It looks like most of you said, I want to do all of these things, or I'm exploring the possibilities, right? So there's probably a lot of things I have left off of this list. Some popular items were drafting reports, proposals, presentations, etc., along with summarizing, brainstorming, etc. So all fantastic use cases, and obviously the world's your oyster when it comes to AI. And then the single biggest questions I see people wanting to answer today, practical tools came in at number 1, over a third of you. How can AI save time or reduce repetitive work? How to use AI responsibly, right? Lots of questions around ethics, policies, environmental impact, etc. I see some thoughts on the broader economy and beyond. How can AI serve clients, etc. Okay, so those are all fantastic. We will try to hit on as many of those as possible. And if I, for some reason, neglect that, I hope you will drop a note in the chat. I want to encourage you to leave questions early and often, and we'll try to get to as many of those as possible during the course of our conversation today. And then as Melanie mentioned, this session will run to 15 minutes past the hour. So that's 2:15 Central where I live. And so hopefully that will give us ample time to get through the material relatively quickly and then do a bunch of Q&A. We may even do some demos live here just to kind of practice using these tools. Give me one moment. I'm going to show my daughter where to plug in, and then we will dive into the material. Okay, let's move right in. So I always like to start off with some learning objectives. First thing, I want to give you a sense of where AI tools and technology sits today. Again, my background is in journalism, communications, and working with nonprofits on fundraising and operations. So I'm not an AI guru, but I've been using it actively in my business for the past 3 years and reading everything I can get my hands on, listening to all the podcasts, etc. Many of you may be in the same boat. If not, that's okay. We'll try to set the stage and go from there. Use that. Secondly, I want to talk a little bit about understanding which tasks are best handled by AI and which ones still require human expertise. I'm going to encourage you throughout today's presentation that being the, as some people say, the human in the loop is really, really important. And in fact, now more than ever. And so never downplay your own expertise, the wisdom, the lived experience you and your colleagues bring within Extension. And you're going to want to use that when you partner with AI. And then finally, excuse me for one moment. All right. So the final piece here is I want to explore some of the benefits of creating tools like custom GPTs. Again, each of the AI platforms, the sort of the leading platforms, I'm talking about ChatGPT from OpenAI, Gemini from Google, and Anthropic from Claude, all have some type of a function where you can build a custom tool using natural language, right? The conversational language you and I use every day, and have the AI produce outputs that can be helpful, valuable, insightful for you. And so we'll talk a little bit about ways that that can benefit you as an extension professional. Quickly about me, I've been, again, working in communications and working with extension professionals for many years. I formerly served as a leader at Farm Journal. Some of you may know that from your extension work. And so, and this is just a quick overview on me. All right. So let's talk a little bit about AI versus human expertise. I want to give you a little bit of a framework here. So on the left-hand side in this box, I want you to think about things that are repetitive tasks, things you do every day as an extension professional, versus the high-value, really human-centric work. I'm talking about going to public meetings, right? Interfacing one-on-one with clients. Those are the kinds of things that today a machine can't reproduce, and arguably we may never want a machine to simulate that for us, right? And so I think the best place to start with an extension is to think about this automation piece, right? With the caveat that you always need to honor what your institution puts in place. There are various requirements that some universities and others have in place that you need to be sure that you are following those things. In cases where you're not able to use it in a professional capacity, there may be opportunities to experiment on your own at home in a personal capacity with a ChatGPT account or similar. The second component is thinking about strategic enhancement. So there are tasks that are somewhat administrative, but also require, might be good for you to bounce ideas, right? You don't necessarily have your colleagues around 24/7 to talk to. There may be an urgent matter you have to attend to for a client you serve. And so AI can help you brainstorm, can role play, act as if you are an extension client in Delaware, help me think this through, ask me questions so I can better serve my clients, that are really a great blend of both human and AI collaboration. And then finally, there are areas of your work that are really dependent on your personal expertise. And so in those cases, things like strategy, empathy, vision, you should own that and hold fast to that as an extension professional. I think a really good first question to ask as you're thinking about AI is, if I had between 2 and 10 hours back each week, where would I invest it? And what are those tasks that I would want to get off of my plate? That can be a great way to start thinking about AI. Excuse me for one moment. I'm terribly sorry. All right. The second piece I would encourage you to think about is aligning with your zone of genius. So things that bring you joy and purpose, really focus those things and say, those are the things I want to do myself. Things that are maybe drudgery or challenging or hard, or I just do them repeatedly. I can, things where you say a monkey could do this, maybe those are things where you can start to leverage AI. The last encouragement I'll give you is that I think it's important to be open yet skeptical, right? You hear lots of big language and ideas about all the things AI can do. You also often hear, some of the challenges that AI poses, right? There are real environmental challenges. There's a carbon footprint. There's water usage, right? There's impact on, at-risk communities. And so there has to be a balance, a blend of both realism and optimism about what the tools can provide, but also you have to draw your own boundaries, right? Things that you're comfortable using it for and things that you're not. I think I saw one question in the chat that we'll revisit in a little while around, is it okay to use AI to write grant proposals? And I think the answer is it depends, right? There may be cases where funders specifically say yes or no. There may be cases where the environment and landscape is changing so fast that you can't predict what the answer to that question is. And so coming up with an ethical framework, a framework that allows you to leverage those tools, but also apply your own human ingenuity, I think is often the best sort of middle ground. And then finally, just recognizing that AI's capabilities and risks continue to evolve. So becoming a student to the degree that you want to be, or finding someone in your network or professional space who can keep you informed, will serve you really well as you begin to use AI tools. So let me just give you a sense of where I see the state of AI tools today. Certainly there's innovation happening across the world. In the United States and China, I would say it's arguably most aggressive. There's the most financial investment, the most conversation at the federal and state and beyond level. And so again, it seems like every week a new model comes out. People are one-upping one another. Companies are spending millions or billions of dollars to get talent, to get investment for data centers, for training these models, etc. And so on the right-hand side in this box, I think there's some really exciting work that's happening around chain of thought and reasoning. So it used to be that in the past, when you talked with a tool like ChatGPT, for those of you who've used it, and many of you have, it's really conversational. It can maybe look up some information for you or summarize things in a concise way, but it didn't necessarily act as if it were thinking like a human being might, right? Really asking itself questions, considering multiple points of view, etc. That's changing really fast. Currently, within a tool like ChatGPT, which is what I'm most familiar with, you have many different options of the models you can choose, right? And they're named these very obscure names. The reality is that in the future, probably this year, AI tools will be integrating all of those capabilities, right? The chat function, the ability to reason, the ability to answer complex questions, and that will probably all be rolled into one. So you, the human being, won't have to select it manually. The machine will just decide for you. And so I think it's important just to understand that there are different strategies that these companies are using to come up with tools that are better and better at answering questions, conversing with you, solving problems. And again, anything I say today may be out of date tomorrow, but this is sort of where things are today. Things that I think are most exciting from the standpoint of extension professionals are things like custom GPT. So I'll show you an example later today. Some of the work that Extension Foundation has been doing around conservation, climate, etc. One of the things I've been supporting Extension Foundation and many extension professionals, perhaps some in this room, has been developing tools that can be used to train on extension data, like help us understand all of the programs in a specific topic area, help us do research around this, compare notes, connect the dots. What trends are we seeing? What opportunities might there be for collaboration? I think that can be applied to a variety of use cases across the extension system that are really exciting. Again, publicly available data, but using it and connecting dots in ways that hasn't been done before, whether you're preparing a proposal, designing a strategy, thinking about ways to bring new partners in the extension system into your network. So customizing AI tools that you can create without any coding experience, you just use the language you and I use to speak to one another, is really exciting. The second innovation that's been in the market for about, I don't know, at least a year, but it continues to improve, is this deep research function. And you may be familiar with tools like Perplexity, which does this, going out on the internet, finding sources, giving you the citations and links so you can actually confirm their validity. Gemini and ChatGPT both have a function called literally deep research. And if you click that button and then type in a query, it will go out and scan, dozens, if not hundreds of website pages, within a matter of, let's say, half an hour or 20 minutes, something that would take a human researcher potentially days to fulfill. And then output for you let's say a 40-page report or a 60-page report on the topic based on some of the questions that you've asked. For example, you might ask, help me understand sort of the state of cooperative extension relative to nutrition education or relative to personal finance, teaching and coaching for, clients in local communities, and help me see what trends are happening in the broader personal finance space that extension might want to apply. and what is extension uniquely qualified to do that it might export to others in the financial, personal finance ecosystem. And so I think that's exciting because even though the research is not perfect, and even though you still have to vet the sources and validate that, which again takes time and patience, you are able to quickly sort of get a landscape assessment that then you can drill deeper on, maybe inspire you to take an action, make a certain decision, design a program a certain way. And again, with citations that you can then verify on your own, which again is that human in the loop. Notebook LM is a tool that Google released relatively recently. I think they now have a paid version as well as a free version, but essentially if you haven't tried it before, Notebook LM is basically a tool that will allow you to upload a giant PDF or document, and then it turns that document into a mini podcast episode. Basically, you have two news anchors who are talking about the document. It sounds like real people. Again, we can talk later about the ethics of simulated voices and those kinds of things. But if you are trying to really parse through, let's say, an RFP, or trying to understand something really dense and get the high level assessment before you dive in deeply, or maybe you've got a client that really just wants the Cliff Notes version of something, this could be a tool that really helps you summarize those things in a way that's interactive, that is engaging to listen to, and that can give you some good insights that you can then dive deeper on or action accordingly. And then finally, I would say that, sort of the next chapter of AI that I think many are predicting is around, voice, being able to communicate with AI tools like I'm speaking to you today and asking questions, having conversations, vision. So AI being able to use your computer or device to see the world around you, to interact with you, to ask questions about what's surrounding you, to help you make decisions. And then agents, right? So AI tools that talk to other AI tools and can do something like, the common example that's used is help me book my, my summer trip to Hawaii. And the AI goes out and, researches all the flights based on your specifications, books the flights, gets your hotels, sends you the tickets, gives you your itinerary. You can think about applications like this for extension, right? Help me design the program, go out and find other extension professionals who might be interested in this, set a meeting for us to discuss possibilities, build the project management plan so we know exactly when our documentation needs to be assembled, when the letters of support need to be ready, and when the final submit button needs to be clicked. There are many possibilities, and of course, many risks, right? Questions like, what tools do we allow access to our data? How do I trust that this is private information? It's not going to be shared widely, right? So these are questions we have to ask as I think as individual extension professionals. And it's also really important that you're very clear upfront on your institution's data governance policies, the IT departments. You can do this, but you can't do that, etc. So, and again, this is an evolving space, and I don't want to overwhelm you. What I want to say is simply these tools are getting arguably better and more effective, and the risks can also grow with that. So I think there needs to be a moderation and a balance, a bias to act, but also a bias to be naturally skeptical and asking a lot of questions before you jump in feet first. Okay, so I'm going to jump in with a few use cases that I can imagine for extension professionals. But before I do that, let me just dive in and take a quick look at the chat and make sure I haven't missed anything yet. Okay, great. So Dory is asking a question around, there are so many AIs, right? And AI arguably is defined differently. In some cases, it's like a chatbot. In some cases, it's like a note taker. So Dory mentioned that Zoom and others have AI assistants you can add that capture notes for you. How are they different from each other, Dory asks, and where do we look to figure that out? So it's a really great question, Dory. A couple of things, like I'll say that oftentimes, if you have a question like this, AI can be a really great place to start, right? So I would frame a prompt to ChatGPT like, you are an expert in all of the AI tools that serve a function of capturing notes in virtual meetings. Please give me an assessment. I am an extension professional doing X, Y, and Z in my job. I need to have notes from my meetings that accomplish the following functions. Please give me a landscape assessment of the top 5 best tools rank them in order of the best to the worst based on my specific use case, and give me links and YouTube videos so I can go and watch how those note takers work. What I think you're going to find, Dory, and others who are listening, is that a lot of these tools, I mean, this is like a race to, I don't know if the finish line is the right word, but it's a race. And so everyone's launching these mini tools. I would say start with tools that are most familiar to you, right? So if you're using Zoom already and your institution approves of it, rather than going out and finding some abstract third-party note taker, experiment with using the note taker for a single meeting and see what the output looks like, right? Look at the email that Zoom sends you with the AI summary. I personally, I use AI record, note takers in Zoom on a sporadic basis. It's helpful for me because it allows me to listen more. On the other hand, I've been a journalist and communicator long enough to know that sometimes the tool doesn't work. And so I personally like having a backup with my own notes. It also helps me to focus and think about what's being said in the conversation. So I think start with native tools that you're familiar with and dabble in it a little bit, again, within the guardrails that your institution has set up. Then when it comes to just general purpose AI tools, like I'm thinking about ChatGPT and Gemini, I would recommend, I've heard Paul Raitzer, who's the CEO of an organization I really respect called Marketing AI Institute. I'll drop that into the chat. Marketing AI Institute specifically was started to help marketing professionals, but I actually think it's really widely relevant for anyone who's curious about AI. They've got a great podcast, a great series of training modules, etc. But the CEO of that institute has said, look, pick one of the 3 or 4 big tools and stick with that and really go deep on it. And I think that advice is exactly right. You can get really overwhelmed really fast experimenting with all these tools, wondering and questioning whether you've got the best and the brightest. But the honest answer is the biggest tools, Gemini and Claude and ChatGPT, have by far the most investment, the most resources, are most aggressively sort of building these tools and releasing them. And so you're going to have a great set of tools at your disposal, regardless of which of those you pick. And then I think the third cut of that, once you've established sort of native tools I already use, one of the big 3, then the third cut would be, are there specific tools in my research or that someone has maybe recommended to me that make sense for the specific work that I do every day, right? So for example, in my role within my company, we use a tool called Instrumental for grants research. And so we subscribe to that. It basically curates funding opportunities. And I've talked about it before on these sessions, nonprofits, government agencies, private foundations, etc. And so I think there are certainly evolving, newly emerging AI tools that are going to solve for very specific problems in very specific industries. I think that's an exciting place for extension professionals to maybe move toward, to socialize within their institutions, but doing that maybe before you dive in feet first, before really understanding what are the parameters, what are the privacy and security considerations, and then maybe starting to integrate those, obviously with full permission, within your own organization. I hope that was helpful. I think at a high level, that's where I would start. I see Robert's question as well. Robert in the chat asked, how do you determine what AI tools keep our data secure? So again, this is a really great question, Robert. If I were you, I think it depends on the reason you're asking the question, right? So if you're asking the question to determine do I have permission to get this tool or to use it, I would definitely start with your IT department or whoever in your institution manages compliance for technology. And they will be the experts. I really like to recommend the book Who Not How by Dr. Benjamin Hardy and Dan Sullivan, because the concept in that book is essentially, rather than trying to learn something really complex like data security and privacy on your own, oftentimes the best approach is to find an expert who knows all about that and can quickly fill you in, right? So there may be a specific use case that you're I'd like to use this, but I'm kind of on the fence because of these data security reasons. That's number one. The other thing I would say is that a lot of these AI tools, I think, are required to have a public-facing website that outlines for you their data security policies. One thing I will say is that you are likely to have greater levels of security, privacy, and protection on a paid plan. And again, the free tools are great. It's often where people get started. But for example, within ChatGPT, which is the platform I'm most familiar with, if you have the free version, anything you use and type in terms of your queries, the outputs, can be used to train OpenAI's models. Whereas if you have a paid tier, like the Teams account, for example, it will explicitly say along the bottom, your conversations are not used to train our models. Now, you and I both know that there have been times throughout history when companies and agencies and others have said one thing and done something quite different. So I do think you need to go into any AI tool with the realization that anything you can't, sort of like in a court of law, anything you can't, say and do can be used against you. In a similar way, I would approach AI tools with that, right? Would I be comfortable if all of this information that I've input into the AI were suddenly published on the front page of the New York Times? If the answer is yes, if it's fairly innocuous, if you have prior consent with partners or organizations or the institution you work with to use that information, fantastic. On the other hand, if there are proprietary things, confidential or sensitive topics, you really need to just apply a level of discretion. Certainly, I would encourage you to read what the organizations are saying publicly about data security. I would also strongly advise caution before you start connecting AI. And this is sort of a next level grad school kind of thing. But increasingly, these AI tools are allowing you to connect, for example, your Dropbox folder or your Google Drive account to AI. The benefits of that, auspiciously, are that you can ask ChatGPT, for example, help me find all of the proposals I've submitted around, grazing land management. And AI could go into your files. It could pull successfully submitted proposals, brainstorming documents with notes on other concepts you've come up with, proposals that didn't go through and why. And that could be really great. On the other hand, when you start connecting AI to these other tools, you also run the risk of sharing data, files, confidential information that you don't want shared with anyone, much less a major AI company. And so, at least for now, I'm really personally, I'm being very conservative as far as what do I connect to AI. I really want to be in the driver's seat. I want full visibility. And I don't know about you all, but my desktop and my folders are packed full of files, of notes. And my brain doesn't have the ability to figure out what all is in there. Like 90% of it's probably fine to share with anybody, but 10% might not be. And so I think just some applying a little just like discretion makes all the sense in the world at sort of the juncture we're at. And I think just starting using the tool, controlling what you feed into those chats, ideally having a paid account of some kind through your institution or something you can do personally on your own for personal things outside of the extension world. Those are some ways to start dipping your toe in the water while also being really sensitive to, security concerns, which are extremely legitimate. So Robert, thanks for the question. I hope that's helpful. Again, keep those questions coming and we'll try to get to as many as possible. Okay, I'm going to give you a few specific use cases. And I'll also try to address the question that was raised earlier around grant writing and whether AI can be used or not. So a few ideas here. I mentioned Marketing AI Institute. They've developed a custom GPT tool that's free for anyone to use called Jobs GPT. And I think this could be a nice exercise for extension professionals because you can basically say, hey, I'm an extension professional. I work in Colorado or Missouri or wherever you happen to be. I specialize in these areas. My clients tend to be these people. I'd like, and my job, day-to-day job typically looks like this, this, and this. You can sort of outline specific activities. And what this tool will do is basically break out your role in any industry and sort of task by task. What do you do in your job? And then the idea is to say, okay, of those tasks, which of those can be fully automated today? Which of them can be partially automated? And it can kind of help you see, okay, based on what I do, I can see that these three things are things I'm going to need to continue to do on my own 100%. But there may be these other 7 things that I can either, 50% or 75% work with an AI to help me do it more effectively, faster, clearer, etc. So I'll have Melanie is always very generous to send out these slides. So this is a clickable link. I'll make sure you all have this. but something to play around with. And again, you can even do this on a piece of paper, right? Just outlining, okay, what are the tasks that I do? Which would I love to get off my plate? And which tend to be more administrative, focusing on those. And again, grant writing, I think, includes administrative aspects, right? It's summarizing blocks of information, biographical information, impact data, things we've been successful at in the past. There are typically common fields for every budget that you're going to submit. And so AI can help you organize that, maybe pull from historical documentation, organize it in the way that this specific funder wants it to be organized, etc. The second step, I think, once you've really identified specific tasks, is to think about ways that you could just experiment using AI in the grant development process. So again, like I said earlier, I'm not aware of any broad language that's banning or discouraging people from using AI for grant writing. On the other hand, and I haven't confirmed this, so don't take my word for it, please look it up on your own. I did see a headline yesterday that indicated there was a federal agency recently that I think maybe stopped accepting applications or something similar because it was very clear that there was just a glut of proposals generated by AI. And so I think that is, if that is true, it does suggest that there is a tremendous amount of discretion that you need to have. I think that AI can be a great assistant at writing specific sections that you can then edit on top of. One piece of advice that I've heard from others, and I think is increasingly going to be important, is that because AI has become so effective at writing, it is often indistinguishable from human writing. And so I think it might be good to get into the habit of whenever you use an AI tool, let's say maybe you have it come up with a biographical summary for yourself or for your institution based on other things you've written in the past. It might be helpful to sort of place that into a Word document or Google Doc and then edit on top of that and track changes or whatever the equivalent is, like the suggestion mode in Google Docs, and keep a paper trail, right? What are the changes that we made? Again, this could become an exhaustive effort, right? If you had to document every single thing you built with AI or not. But again, I think there is going to be a premium on human thinking and human writing. There's also the clear benefits that society is absolutely adopting AI for writing purposes. And so I think if you're able to keep some basic records documenting your revisions, how you really made it your own rather than just letting the computer do it all, which I think none of us in this room want to do. As nice as that sounds, right? I think there's plenty of risk involved there. I think you're on safer ground. Again, that doesn't guarantee you're not going to be shut out, because everyone else was a bad actor and just used AI. But at least it gives you something to fall back on and to demonstrate your goodwill, your commitment to excellence, your leveraging of your own unique expertise and resources. So again, to the degree that you can document and keep a paper trail, I think that could be helpful, certainly in the future, but potentially today. Some possible use cases for AI, building grant deliverable timelines. My observation is that grant submission deadlines are only getting shorter. They're not getting longer. And so building reasonable timeframes and figuring out what you and your colleagues can reasonably accomplish is going to be more important than ever. Developing project management checklists, right? So maybe there are routine processes you follow every time you find an RFP. You put together a proposal, you make sure you've got your I's dotted and T's crossed before the submission. So using AI as a tool to build the checklist, but also training it in such a way with like a custom GPT so that it remembers, oh yes, whenever Sam or Virginia or whoever is building a grant proposal, these are the checklists you follow. And so, for example, you could build a tool like that and then converse with the AI and say, hey, I just downloaded the RFP, I've given it a read. What's the next step based on the checklist I've trained you on? And it could say, well, the next step is to, draft a project narrative based on the program of work you're going to be proposing. So again, thinking about ways to leverage AI as an extension of your memory and as a tool to really get you organized and focused as these timelines for grant proposals shrink. And then finally, using AI to recommend ways to streamline repetitive tasks, right? You can always go to AI and say, you are an expert. You are the world's foremost expert in organizing extension activities for busy local offices. I'm an agent and I need your help figuring out a way to better respond to our clients' phone calls or emails within a 24-hour period. Currently, we are, we keep a running checklist that we check off in the office that everyone can see, and, et cetera, et cetera. Help me think about ways we could make this, better, that we could help serve our clients more quickly. And AI can be a great partner for brainstorming in that case. Step 3 would be, as you start to, define your tasks, as you start to experiment with how AI can help you, then think about ways to not just, save time and do administrative work, but really improve your strategic thinking, reduce overwhelm, maximize your time on those high value work streams that you are best qualified to do. I think that's a natural progression, especially for those of you on the call who are, new to this or just getting started. And I mentioned Jobs GPT, so here's just a screen grab of that. Use case number 2, I think enhancing and customizing communication. So this could be true in a grant proposal. It could also just be true in everyday conversation with clients or internally with your colleagues, leadership, etc. AI can be a great resource for evaluating your communication, maybe suggesting ways to improve or reframe a message. Perhaps there's like a sensitive topic or there's something that you've been wrestling with, right? Like a feedback that you need to give to somebody that you're not sure. You can talk to the AI and say, you are an expert in interpersonal communication, especially when it comes to sharing information in a way that's direct, but also kind and compassionate. Here's the situation I'm trying to resolve. Help me think about 3 possible ways I might handle this conversation, either, in a conversation, in an email, to get the best resolution for both me and my colleague. You can also use it to refine correspondence with funders. So, thinking about really understanding what is a funder asking for, how do they want the information in that proposal packaged, and then having AI study what you've written and prepared to say, okay, what is working really well here, and also what gaps might there be. So for example, maybe there are specific keywords like resilience or workforce development that a funder wants to see loud and clearly how your proposal addresses those key pain points. And perhaps you've used other terms that talk about the same issues, but it's not in the way that the funder is likely to be ideally suited to receive. AI can be a great partner in sort of providing an edit, providing a second set of eyes to really help you make sure all of those details are dialed in. And then I would also say, we talked about AI assistants on Zoom and other meeting platforms. Definitely lean into those tools. They're not perfect. They don't necessarily capture all of the nuance that you might want, but they do allow you to have a certain degree of freedom, right? That you don't have to take as many notes, but you do have the ability to focus more, to really think deeply, to collaborate. So don't hesitate to use those tools when they can be useful. Again, my admonition is simply use the tools, but then you just sort of trust but verify, right? Make sure those tools are actually giving you what you need. And if not, look for another tool or go back to the human way of doing things, or maybe find a blend of the two. All right. And then the final use case, and then I'll dive back into the chat and see what questions we have cropping up. I think increasingly there are opportunities, again, within institutions that authorize them, to build what are called custom GPTs or AI tools that are developed with natural language. So basically, these are tools that sit on top of ChatGPT or Anthropic, but you give them specific instructions. So for example, you might define a repetitive task, right? I need your help coming up with article ideas for our monthly extension newsletter. You could then say you are an expert in coming up with recommended ideas for cooperative extension professionals working in the state of Montana. Specifically, you are serving, and then list the following clients. For example, you might list ranchers, you might list foresters, you might list business professionals, bankers, whatever the case might be, educators. I want you to help. The purpose of this custom GPT is to help me come up with specific ideas for serving them up with fresh newsletter content that's going to really help them address key questions they have. And then you might upload to that, for example, past newsletter articles that you've written. You might say, your instructions are to study past articles I've written and uploaded here to really understand our tone of voice, the way we talk to our clients, the phrases that we use, etc. And so then when you go and say, hey, I want your help coming up with a fresh batch of newsletter article ideas, it is trained on what extension does, your local area, what your clients need and want, and it also knows how you write and communicate, so it really understands the kinds of themes you prefer, and then you can work with it from there to get an even better output. The final piece I'll say here is that there can be other applications, right? So maybe you're using these tools to take notes and turn them into reports. Maybe you're using this to take learning objectives and then come up with copy that you can use in slides for presentations that you're giving within extension. And again, we talked about project management timelines earlier. So in a moment, I'll give you an example of a custom GPT and sort of show you how that works. But before I do that, let me just pause, and I'm going to hop into the chat and see what kinds of questions we have here. Susan Harrison asks, are grantors using AI to review or rank grant proposals, and how would that shape grant proposals? Susan, it's a really good question. I'll say up front, the answer I have is I don't know. Having said that, I was visiting at a conference earlier this summer with a program officer or someone in development at a major foundation, and they are using AI in ways I'd never even considered, right? So they're basically, as I understand it, they were doing things like sort of inputting all of their grantees' programs, understanding trends across the different programs of work that they're funding, maybe spotting gaps, like things that they would like to fund but haven't considered previously, what's working, what's not working. So arguably, many foundations are not at that level, but the most professional, I would say those that have been around the longest, have the most money, and are very experienced at working with grantees are undoubtedly using AI, probably in ways that are, very novel and would blow our minds. So I don't think that's something to be scared of, but I do think it's important to be aware that AI is likely going to be a part of the proposal review process. Now, can I confirm that? No, but I would expect that just because of the broad utility of these tools, I would expect at some point, probably government agencies, private foundations, if you're funding someone, the funder is likely going to be using AI as part of the process, right? It's already happening in screening for job applicants, for careers and that kind of thing. So I would assume AI will be used to review and rank grant proposals. Now, my hope is that that's not the only thing that's being used, right? My hope is that there is people who are intimately familiar with the subject matter, who are passionate about the work, who are really being discerning and making those decisions. I suspect there's going to be a very wide-ranging continuum of how that process happens. For those that are really strapped for time and really want to go all in on automation, there may be a lot of screening tools and only what the AI recommends gets funded. On the other end of the spectrum, there may be those that say, you know what, we want to be intimately involved in this process. AI really has a very limited place, and probably a lot of people somewhere in the middle. In terms of how that would shape grant proposals, again, I think this speaks to sort of the uncertainty of it all. I would suggest that, again, being the human in the loop, making sure that you're not using AI to sort of wholesale write proposals. And when you do use AI, you're being very strategic. You're keeping records of how you used it. And you're also, I think one thing I talk to my clients a lot about is that I think it's increasingly important to build human-to-human relationships before you ever get to the proposal stage. Now, is that always practical? Certainly not. But the more that you can sit across the table or next to someone, ideally, whether that's a program officer, whether it is a CEO of a corporation, depending on where you are getting your funding from, building those relationships, having them invested, understanding what they're looking for in their philanthropy, their investment, understanding how extension can be a tremendous partner to them, and using that as a way to build security, sustainability, human contact. I am optimistic that some of these AI uses can actually free up time to do those kinds of things. I think they have to go together, though. I think if you're only relying on, even if you authored this entirely as a human being and submitted a proposal, increasingly you are competing against others who have no qualms with using AI for part or all of their proposal. Again, not trying to be discouraging. I'm just saying that I think our business development strategy has to become more deeper, right, and more human centric and more relational. So that's again, I'm sort of evolving my thinking on this, but that's what I would say at an early structure. I think it makes the landscape more competitive. I think it makes, frankly, candidly, your jobs harder. And I also think it gives you an opportunity to set extension apart because of the fact that you're prioritizing human relationships, partnership, collaboration. You're able to demonstrate impact with data that you've developed because you were a person going out and helping other people, other clients in your community. So I'm optimistic that the humans win, and I think it's also just a new landscape. It's a call to action to really strategically begin thinking about going beyond just grants and proposals into a more holistic relationship management business development strategy. So I hope that's helpful. Appreciate Rohith sharing their experience with Susan. I recently was part of a panel which reviewed some federal grant proposals, and we had explicit instructions from the chair not to use AI to review the proposals, just sharing my experience. That's great to hear. I'm excited that that's the case. Again, I'm not opposed to AI maybe being a part of that process, but I do think there's such value, and it's so important to retain the human in the loop. And so I'm really heartened by that experience. So thank you for sharing that. Awesome. Okay, those are the questions I'm seeing for now, and please continue to drop those in. As we round out the presentation and move into Q&A, let me just leave you with a couple of details. I'm going to stop sharing my screen, and then I'm going to show you a tool. So this is a tool that we recently, so if you're part of the Connect Extension community, this is something that we just published in there yesterday. And this is a specific tool that we've developed to help extension professionals who are specifically working in climate really understand the body of work, right? What is happening across different extension programs. So what we did was that there was a working group that followed from the climate action plan that was published over a year ago. And there was a working group called the Implementing a Climate Response Working Group decided to, as part of its work, to help the extension community develop this tool that allows extension professionals to really research and understand what extension is doing in this space based on vetted information. And so what we were able to do was to build, just to give you sort of a visual example, if I go to, well, let's see here. I guess I can't look at the back end. If you were to look at the back end of this tool, you would basically see, if you've ever published like a basic website, you would see a field to name the tool. So in this case, it's the Climate Action Insights tool. You would see a field for describing that tool. So you could say, for someone who maybe is new to the tool for the first time, this is how you use this. And then you can come up with these buttons that start a conversation. Now, the buttons I've found are not particularly helpful. I always like to start just by adding a specific query. So in this case, because I know that this tool can both consult data that's been verified by extension, and it also has the ability to search the web, I'm going to come up with a very specific query. So if someone would, I would love for you to drop in the chat what's something you would like to know about the work that extension does in either climate, conservation, water. Maybe drop a question or an issue in the chat, and we'll use that as a way to demo this tool. Like Melanie said, we have lots of time for questions. I know in a moment, for those of you who have to leave early, Melanie's going to drop a quick survey in the chat, just giving us some feedback on, was this session helpful to you? What do you want to know in the future? And I'll have a little bit of a feedback survey toward the end of the call for myself. So I'm going to go ahead and just make something up here. And obviously, if someone wants to come up with something specific, please let me know. I'm going to say something like, you are an expert in cooperative extension work happening at the intersection of forestry and climate. I would like you to do a landscape assessment of work happening in the continental US in this space. First, consult your training knowledge and gather any insights on active programs or past programs in this area. Second, please do a search of the internet and provide me with verified, clickable links to additional forestry programs that you could not find in the training data. You often want to tell it something like, think carefully about this assignment and ask me up to 3 clarifying questions, pausing after each for my feedback before proceeding. So what you're trying to do is sort of set it up. You assign it a role. You are an expert in X topic. Then you're saying, this is the problem I'm trying to solve. And then you give it some parameters, right? So oftentimes you can get a decent output by just saying, go and do this. You get a better output if it actually interviews you first. And then you're able to get a higher level of detail and clarity when it finally provides you with the information you were looking for. I learned that technique from an author named Jeff Woods, who wrote a book called The AI-Driven Leader. Again, the idea is you just have it ask you some questions. You give it a very specific parameter. I only want you to ask 3 questions, because at the end of the day, AI will ask you as many questions as you want, but you may not get to the results you're looking for. So let's go ahead and hit enter, and let's see what output we get based on this tool. So it's going to ask us 3 questions based on our request. The first one is, what do you consider the boundaries of forestry and climate? Okay, that's a really good question. So in this case, I am going to say, I would like you to scan all of these categories you've identified. And please make sure in your final output to organize your program learnings by category. For example, with bolded subheads such as urban and community, carbon and climate, etc. So we're going to give it, we can have a conversation with it and also better define exactly what you're looking for, because it's just a machine. It may misinterpret what you're asking for. So that conversational element can be helpful. All right, the second piece, what is your desired output format? Would you like a bulleted list, a narrative summary, or a table format? So for this purpose, I would like you output this in an, I'm going to say executive summary, narrative report, very concise and to the point, with clickable links to resources and more information on each program. Again, follow my instructions regarding topical subheadlines with bullet points detailing each program underneath those. All right, so it's got 2 of 3 questions. The third question, would you like me to prioritize any specific types of land-grant institutions or geographic regions? Okay, great. So you can see that this tool already is aware that there are different kinds of institutions, and it maybe call out specific areas that I might want to focus on. Again, I'm assuming that I'm doing this at a national level, but you in your own role might want to only focus on a state, a region, or a specific type of institution. So I'm going to say, I'd like you to scan all of those institutions and do a nationwide scan, leaving no stone unturned. Sometimes you'll be surprised if you use like a very, colloquialism, human turn of phrase, like leave no stone unturned, or be exhaustive in your search, or do not deviate, do not hallucinate. I'm actually going to add that. Do not hallucinate or make up details under any circumstances. If you don't know an answer, say so. Speak to it as if it were a person, so be kind. As silly as that sounds, it tends to generate a better result. Speak to it as you're being like a nice person, and also ask it, clarify your boundaries. Okay, let's go ahead and hit enter, and we'll see what comes up next. Okay, so it's going to walk you through the process. I'm going to do an internal scan of my knowledge. I'm also going to go out onto the internet and scan. Which of these would you like me to do first? Go ahead and do your internal scan, then give a summary report. Then I'll ask you to proceed with the internet search. So sometimes it's good to walk before you run and have it give you a sample output so you make sure it's following your instructions. And okay, so sometimes it takes a little bit, especially if it's a more detailed or thorough request. In this case, it's going to go ahead and give us some of its initial findings. So let's go ahead and look here. So again, all of the data that is listed here should, in theory, be based solely on the training data that was fed to this specific custom GPT. Again, these were verified by multiple extension professionals. It also is pulling in links. I don't know for sure if these links come from the data or maybe came from the web, but regardless, you can see that it's sort of broken this down by category, starting with urban, then going to carbon and climate, wildfire resilience, reforestation, etc. So it's giving you a brief description and a link. Now you could dive deeper. You could try to understand better, okay, which 1994 institutions, etc. But again, it's going to give you some, basic details. I will also say just a few things to call out here, and then we'll dive back into the questions. This particular custom GPT was trained to be naturally hesitant and to say what it doesn't know. So in this case, it says, I noticed the following gaps. There's limited documentation of climate forestry programs at specific kinds of institutions, 1890s and 1994 specifically. There's sparse information on regional coordination. It's also unsure about whether these programs are continuously funded and active beyond this time frame, and unsure about specific access to these programs. It also always ends with this statement: please be aware that climate analysis is incomplete. It's always advancing. If you have something to add or a correction, send it to this email address. So as you think about the possibility of maybe building some form of these tools for your own work where you're authorized to do so, you can always include elements like this so that whoever is using the tool knows the parameters and really is able to critically think through, do I use this information? Do I modify it? Again, making sure that there's always that human in the loop. Okay, the last thing we'll do, and then we'll jump back to questions. Great. Now please proceed with your web scan of other program. And actually, sometimes you make a misspelling. It's okay. You don't have to be perfect. It will overlook that. Web scan of other programs that are not included in your knowledge training data. Okay, so let's just see what it brings us from the web, and then we'll dive back into our questions. I'm showing you this not to say like this is a tool you need to be using today, although if you're curious, shoot Melanie a note or me, and we are happy to share more information. I mainly just wanted to say, hey, these are some opportunities. So actually, the climate pat is something that comes up here. It actually goes through these categories and says, hey, here's a program we found that wasn't in the data based on this category. Again, Wikipedia, not a great source, right? Sometimes it might be to start, but it probably wouldn't be one I would depend on, so I want to go check that out. And then, again, a few other programs here. So I hope this at least gives you a sense of what these tools are capable of, even if it's something that you're not ready to use today. I think, this can be an assistant, a research assistant, something that helps you compile ideas, maybe generate some creative insights you wouldn't have had on your own. So jumping back into the questions here, let me first share my screen. And I'm going to go ahead and jump ahead. And I've got a quick little survey here. If you're able to just do this while you're listening in the background, it would be greatly helpful to me. If you only have a chance to do one survey, please make it Melanie's. But again, this gives me some insights to help you in future sessions get as much value as possible. Let me look at the questions we've got here. Rohith asks, are there resources to learn how to write prompts for better output? Absolutely. So a couple of ideas. Just a straight up Google search or using your favorite free AI tool to ask, like, could you please be my coach and train me to write a better prompt? I am especially interested in writing prompts in my career as an extension professional. I think I'm going to be using AI mostly for, writing articles, sending email updates, and organizing my calendar, hypothetically. And have the AI work back and forth with you to really train you on how to write a prompt. My favorite new hack, which I'm not sure where I learned this from, but it's not my original idea, is having AI write the master prompt. So what I mean by that is you say, you are the expert at writing, the world's greatest prompt to solve the following problem. Help me think through, ask me 3 questions to clarify exactly what I want the output to be, what the prompt should do, and then write the prompt for me. And at that point, you can either just copy and paste the prompt that it gives you and use that to solve the problem, or you can use that and modify it. You can use it to train a custom GPT and maybe upload some other files and data to make the tool better able to serve you. But that's what I would suggest. Tons of YouTube videos out there, tons of resources. I suspect even within the Extension Foundation, I know they have some really great AI focused work that's happening on the tech team. And so reach out to Melanie, reach out to me. Happy to put you in touch. But I think there's a lot of self-education you can do with prompting. And at some point, the tools may get good enough where you don't really need an exhaustive prompt. You can just say, here's what I need, give me the goods. And it does that. So I think, two things: learn at a pace that makes sense for you, take advantage of the tremendous free resources from Extension Foundation just available online in general, and then consider having AI write the prompt for you in cases where it maybe seems a little overwhelming or you just like to see what it's capable of. In terms of suggested resources for building a tool like what I'm demonstrating here, a couple of ideas. Number one, I would say, again, use the resources I've named already. I think there are some great, I think there's nothing that replaces doing it yourself the first time just to experiment. And so if you are able to get a basic subscription to one of these tools through your institution or university, I would definitely encourage you to practice that or find someone at the institution who's doing this already. Certainly you could go find a consultant or a contractor to help you. In my role, I've been working with Extension Foundation and its extension partners to develop these kinds of tools. So always happy to have a conversation and explore what's possible or give a little coaching myself. Again, I'm not on a free basis, just to give you some ideas or some clues that might be helpful. But at any rate, I think there's nothing beats trying it yourself or finding someone who's done it and learning from them and asking them a bunch of questions, seeing it work in the real world. That's a great place to get started. Melanie asks around any thoughts on the MIT study showing ChatGPT is eroding critical thinking skills and brain connectivity and making people feel more lonely. As research institutions, I'd like us to make sure we're looking at and thinking deeply about this kind of research study and effective ethical uses. For this reason, I only use AI for first pass at minute minute taking and other thoughtless tasks. I'm also hearing college professor friends and family tell me they no longer assign written assignments because of the ubiquitous chat GPT, so hard to tell what is chicken or egg. Really, really good, important, thoughtful feedback and questions, Melanie. I'm trying to think about some high-level thoughts on this topic. Number one, I will go back to what I said earlier, that now more than ever, you have to keep a human in the loop. You have to use your human discernment. Is this a good use case or not? Are the risks greater than the rewards? Is this authorized and ethical, or is it not? And honestly, I think now more than ever, we're having to write these rules as institutions and individuals. Like, you can't rely on, an agency, an institution, a think tank, right? There's a lot of great work happening, but it feels to me very uncoordinated for the magnitude of what these tools are capable of doing. And so I think you are wise and astute to be very cautious about how you're thinking about these tools. You are exactly right that research from MIT and others is pointing not just to the erosion in critical thinking skills and brain connectivity, but also there have been stories in pick a media outlet of people who've had conversations with these tools, been convinced of conspiracy theories, times when AI tools have told people tragically to take their own lives. And so this is a technology that is completely unfamiliar and without precedent in human history. And so consequently, I think we need to be more cautious than ever before. I think you're right that there are some tremendous benefits from the administrative functions. And I also think that we have a responsibility individually and within our institutions to be putting these conversations forward. Thinking more maybe tactically beyond the very real human health risks, the very real critical thinking risks that AI can pose. I would say providing training and resources, if you are using AI in your institution and you're in a leadership position, really understanding what professional development is out there from Extension Foundation and others, making sure your team knows how to use it and how not to use it, what is authorized in your specific case and what isn't, and also things that you're evaluating that maybe you're authorizing on a limited or experimental basis for now that might be retracted in the future, right? I think we have to be intellectually honest and say that just because we think something's really great and snazzy now doesn't mean that in 3 months we may say, whoa, this is too much, it's gone too far, I just can't do this anymore. I mean, so in addition to my work with Extension, I have a personal interest in writing books and authors and the book publishing industry. And I will say that the backlash at AI, especially in fiction writing and just creative circles in general, artists, is overwhelming. And I completely empathize with that. And I really am torn, because many of these tools were trained on proprietary work. They didn't get it permission. They didn't get paid or compensated for that. And it is increasingly going to compete with those human artists who are doing work that we all love and appreciate. So I think the more you can support humans, organizations that maybe are leveraging AI, but with humans clearly in the loop to partner with you and to really think through these things together and use them ethically on your own terms, investing financially, investing your time, and not working with those that leave you feeling uncomfortable, right? I think everyone should read or listen to the book Empire of AI by Karen Howe, which primarily talks about OpenAI and the very sort of the long and winding road to where that company's been today, but really more generally, how AI is trained, the impacts on communities, the impacts on the environment. Again, I'm not suggesting that everyone should stop using AI, nor am I suggesting that everyone should just use AI without question. I think there is so much we don't know. There's so much uncertainty that it really starts with your institution and your own moral and ethical compass. And then I think taking an experimental approach, really understanding and thinking deeply, investing in research, supporting this research, publicizing the research, and providing adequate training are going to go a long way in an environment that is deeply uncertain and often very confusing. So I know I probably didn't address your question nearly as adequately as I should have, but I really appreciate you raising those issues, because I think more and more what we're talking about now is going to become a public conversation, right? It's going to influence the political environment. It's undoubtedly going to influence the workforce. And so the more we can be raising this, and I think Extension, it can be a tremendous torchbearer for these issues, and putting them on the main stage locally, so that filters up to the national level. I think that's more important than ever. So thank you for raising that. Melanie says, thanks. Those of us who grew up analog have these skills and can be the human to fall back on. I do worry about younger generations. Yes, I mean, I'm a dad of 4 kids, ages 7 to 14. And so these are things I think about all the time, right? What is education going to look like when my freshman in high school gets ready for college? So at any rate, I know we're about out of time. I will say, if there are any last minute questions, I'd be more than happy to answer them. I would love to continue this conversation offline as well. I'm at nateburt@extension.org. And if you ever want to discuss further, share ideas, share existential crises, all of them are appropriate and invited. I just want to say thank you so much to Melanie and the foundation. Thank you to all of you for your time today. And with that, I will turn the floor back over to Melanie to wrap us up for today.
Wow, Nate, thank you so much. As always, you have introduced me as someone who has been dabbling in AI. You still showed me so much, especially like how you prompted everything. So I'm excited to dive in. Thank you, everyone, for spending the last hour with us. We appreciate you being here, especially everyone that was new. Please look forward to an email early next week with everything that Nate shared here today, including the recording and slides, so you can go back and reference and practice. And as Nate said, he's a resource. We have a lot of AI resources here at the Extension Foundation that I will include in the follow-up email. But thanks so much for this conversation, for everyone's engagement, and we hope to see you next time.